Okay, so this statement can also be written as total die value plus equals die 1 plus die value die 1 value plus die 2 value. In other words, what is being added to what is being added to total die value is the sum of die 1 and die 2, right? Or you can also think of it this way, that the sum of die 1 and die 2 is being added to total die value. Okay, so whichever one makes sense to you, you can use that if it helps. Okay, so now we're done with the roll dice method. Now let's go ahead and create a constructor for this class. Now the constructor, remember I mentioned no static keyword, no return type. So it also has to be the name of the class. In this case, the name of the class is player, so the constructor has to be called player. And then the constructor in this class, let's see, anytime someone tries to create an object from this class, do we want to accept any arguments? No. What we want to do is we want to set as initial values the die 1 value to be equal to 0. We want to set as initial value the die 2 value to be also equal to 0, and the same thing for total die value. So total die value is also going to be equal to 0 here. So anytime someone creates a player object, the die 1 value of the player is going to be 0, die 2 value is going to be 0, and then the total die value of course is also going to be 0. Okay, so now again we can create more accessors and mutators in this class, but for now we don't really need them. Unless we need them, we will create, we're not going to create them, right? So we'll only create them when we need them. So for now I think we should be all set with this, because all we're doing is, let's see, oh yeah, we'll need an accessor to get the total die value, right? We'll need an accessor to get what's the total die value so far. So let's go ahead and do that. So my constructor will stay down here. This is one method. I'm going to go ahead and create another instance method. It's going to be a public. I'm going to return something. I'm going to return the total die value, which is an int. So I'm going to specify the return type to be an integer, and I'll call this get total die value. And get total die value is not going to accept any arguments, so I'm not going to define any parameters. What all it's going to do is it's going to return the total die value. Okay, so I think we're looking good. If we need more methods, we'll create them. Okay, so let's save this. I'm going to go ahead and compile this and save it in the same folder. I'm going to save it as player.java, and we didn't have any errors, so that's fine. So now, because both files are saved in the same folder, they should be able to work with each other, because when I was trying to create a die object, it said, okay, where is this die class? It looked in the same folder and realized that there's a die class here, so I was able to create a die object and use it. Now let's go ahead and create our program itself. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the question, create a new file, paste the question, and then start that. Let's go ahead and create the class for that. So public class, and I'll call this game. I'll just call this game 21. Just game 21, and then I'll go ahead and I'll create the main method. Here. Okay. Oops, I made a mistake here. All right. So let's see. For this assignment, okay, so you will write a program that lets a user play against the computer in a variation of the popular blackjack game. In this variation of the game, 2 6-sided dice are used instead of cards. The dice are rolled and the player tries to beat the computer's hidden total without going over 21. Here are some suggestions for the game's design. All right. Okay, so each round of the game is performed as an iteration of a loop that repeats as long as the player agrees to roll the dice. So we know we're going to be using a loop, and the loop is going to iterate only when the player wants to, only when the player agrees to roll the dice, right? So let's see how we're going to construct this. The first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and create the loop. Okay, let's start with a loop. I'm going to create a character variable. I'm going to call it play again. A character variable, I'm going to call it play again, and set the initial value to be y for yes. Okay, it's a character variable. And I'm going to start the loop, a while loop, and say that while play again is equal to y, meaning if the player, well, we're going to ask the user, all right, but now we're just creating a structure. If the player says yes, then do what's in the loop, right? So let's see. So each round of the game is performed as an iteration of a loop that repeats as long as the player agrees to roll the dice. Okay, so that's what we've done here. And the player's total does not exceed 21. And the player's total does not exceed 21. Okay. Well, first of all, we need to know the player's total. The player has to, before we know the total, the player also has to roll the dice, right? So let's see. Let's see over here. 1 second. All right, so we have this. That's fine. Let's go ahead and create a player object. Okay, let's create a player object, one to represent the user and one to represent the computer. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a player object. All right, so as soon as the Java sees this player class and class name, and I, for example, create a variable, a player class type variable of, let's say, player 1. It's going to know that I'm trying to create a variable, a class type variable, right? It's going to realize that this is not one of the primitive data types. It's not an int, it's not a double, it's not a character. So it's going to say, okay, you're trying to create a class type variable. So let me look in that same folder to see if this player class exists. And it's true, it exists. So it's going to go ahead and reserve this variable for a player object. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a new player object in memory. And it's going to return, using the equal sign, the memory address of this object to player 1. So player 1 is going to reference the player object. All right, now player, using the constructor, we defined it not to accept any argument. It's going to set the die1 and 2 value to 0, and the total die value to also 0. All right, let's do the same thing and create another player, which is going to be the computer. So I'm going to go ahead and say player computer, call it computer, is going to be equal to new player. All right, so now we have the players, right? Remember, in the player class we had the roll dice, method. So I can call that method. I can say player one dot, let's see, dot roll, what's it called? Roll dice. Player one dot roll dice. And let's see, the roll dice actually doesn't have any arguments, right? So all it's going to basically roll the dice and set the die 1 and die 2 value of this particular object. So player 1, where is it? Sorry, I'm in here. Player 1 dot roll dice, and let's do the same thing for the computer. Roll the dice with both of them. Right now we just want to test it, so we can even I'm going to cut this. Okay, let's cut this and then test a few things. So player 1 dot roll dice, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the computer. This is going to be computer dot roll dice. Let's just print out the total value of the total die value of each of them. All right, so let's print out player 1 dot get remember we created this method which is get total die value. So it returns the total die value of that particular object. So we're only testing to see the total value, just to see if it's working, the total die value. So get total die value. So it's printing that. Let's separate that with, let's say, a hyphen, a couple of hyphens, and then computer dot get total value, just to print out the total value to see if it's correct. Now this is a method, so it has the parentheses. This also. So let's compile this, save this as game21. It's fine, game21.java in the same location. All right, as long as it's in the same location, it will be able to use this to create the player class. All right, compile this and it's fine. So let's run this and see what happens. Okay, we have an error. Let's see what it's saying. N must be positive. Where is N? Where is N? N must be positive. What is that? Just a moment. I'm not seeing what's wrong here. Okay, it looks to be in the die class. Let's see, run this. N must be positive. I don't know I'm not sure what it's saying. Okay, well, I compile this. Let's run this again. Just bear with me as I go through this to try to figure it out. Okay, so I figured it out. Yeah, I had to walk out to the bathroom and then just refresh and then I knew it was a silly mistake, and I'm sure some of you saw it and went like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. All right, so when I was creating the die class over here, when we were creating the constructor for the die class, anytime someone creates an object from this class, the person provides a number of sides, right? And I was supposed to set the number of sides filled to the number of sides given and not the die value. So that was mainly the issue that's mainly the issue, right? There was another issue also that I found, but when someone gives us a number of sides, we want to set the number of sides filled to the number of sides given and not the die value, because it doesn't make any sense at all. So let's go ahead and change this to number of sides. Right, so now we are setting the number of sides to the number of sides given. So that's the first thing we fixed there. And in the player class also, remember when we were creating a die class, anytime someone creates a die object from this, it automatically calls the roll method. So it basically gives the die a value. It gives the die a die value. So in the player class, once we create the two die object, we don't have to call the roll again, because once we create the object, they already have the value, right? So let's move these two roll methods. We don't need them. Once we've created these two objects here, we've already given them, basically this is the number of sides. We've already given them, because the constructor automatically calls the roll method, they already have a value. So let's set the die1 value of the player class to the value of the die of die one, which we are using the get die value method in the die class to get the value. So yeah, we don't have to. Sorry, in the player class, we don't have to go ahead and call the roll method again. It calls the roll method anytime we try to create an object from the die class. So now we can get the value and store it in die one, get the value and store it in die two, and then accumulate, get a total of it and store it in total die value. All right, so now let's go back to our game of 21. What we were trying to do was we created two player objects. We call the roll dice method in the player class, which basically creates two die objects. So basically they're already rolled, and we are getting the value and storing it in die one and die two, adding it up to total die value. What we wanted to do was just see the total die value of each of them. So let's compile this and then run it. And we can see that the total die value of player, because that's the first one, is 9. Total die value of the computer is 3. Now let's go ahead and run this again. You can see the changes from 3 to 6. Run this again. Oops, sorry, hit the wrong button. Run this again. You can see that the total is 212. So it's working, at least with the total die value. So it's working, so that's good. All right, so now let's continue. I apologize for that. I didn't see it. It's something very trivial. I just didn't see it. And for those of you who saw it, good job. Okay, I didn't see it. If you didn't see it, you're just like me, so don't worry about it. This happens all the time. Okay. So now we know that once we roll the dice for both players, it works. We can call this multiple times. We can call this multiple times like this. They can do this, and then ultimately we are going to use a loop, right? But now I just want to roll it 3 times, and so we can keep track of the total die value of each of them. Once we run it, we can see that 17, 16. You can see it's increasing actually. 22, 23. So it's keeping track of both. Basically the rolls of both players. So let's just leave it as 1 for now. Let's go back to the question over here. It says, so over here, at the beginning of each round, the program will ask the user whether or not he or she wants to roll the dice to accumulate points. All right, so that means that the computer is going to roll, because over here it says during each round during each round, the program simulates the rolling of 2 6-sided dice. It rolls the dice first for the computer, and then it asks the user whether he or she wants to roll. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Let's first of all ask the user if he or she wants to roll. Now think about it. I'm over here. It said at the beginning of each round, the program will ask the user whether or not he or she wants to roll the dice to accumulate points. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we are going to be accepting user input. So let's go ahead and use this kind of class to accept user inputs. You can also use the G option pane, but I'm just choosing to use this kind of class. So to use this kind of class, I'm going to go ahead and import it. So this program can have access to it. So import java.util.scanner. I'm importing the scanner class located in the java.util package in the Java API. Okay. All right. So now that we have the scanner, let's go ahead and create the scanner object, so we can use it to accept user input. So scanner, I'm creating a scanner object called scanner. I'm creating a new scanner object in memory, passing in the system.in method, which is basically going to accept byte info from the keyboard. And then now I'm returning using the equal sign the reference address or the memory address of that object to scanner, so I can use the scanner to accept user input, right? So now let's use a regular system.out.print statement, println statement, to ask that. Well, before that, let's just cut this. Well, the question said that we should, at the beginning of each round, the program will ask the user whether or not he or she wants to roll the dice to accumulate, right? To accumulate the points. So let's see. Let's see over here. Okay, so we can start outside a loop. Okay, so because the question over here said that during each round, the program simulates the rolling of 2 6-sided dice. It rolls the dice first for the computer, and then it asks the user whether he or she wants to roll. So let's roll the dice first for the computer, and we can do that by just doing computer.rollDice, because we define that in the player class here, roll dice, and it's going to give the computer's die 1 value and die 2 value a value, right? And it's going to basically add them up, and then we're going to know its total die value as well. So roll the dice for the computer, and then let's display a message. Okay, let's display a message. Hold on one second. Well, we'll need our scanner class, so let's just leave that also here. As a matter of fact, let's just leave that above here somewhere. So we have our scanner class. That's for accepting input. We've created our toPlayer object. We've rolled, or we've rolled the computer. The computers, both the computer has rolled both dice, and then now we're going to display a message saying that, the computer has rolled or roll, I don't know, rolled or roll. The computer's done. the computer is done. Right? Or the computer just roll. The computer just roll. And then now we can ask the user for, or we can, so we can also start with a loop, right ahead, because we've already initialized play again to y, right? So let's just cut this for a second. Hold on a second. Let's go ahead and create the loop that we were talking about before. So again, I'm trying to create this question based on how I understand it. Okay, so that's why it's a bit rough, but at least we're learning, so that's good. So play again will initially be y, right? So let's say while play again is equal to y, or is equal to y for yes, right? That's one condition. Over here it said that each round of the game is performed as an iteration of the loop that repeats as long as the player agrees to roll the dice. As long as the player agrees to roll the dice. As long as the player selects y for play again, right? And the player's total does not exceed 21. And the player's total does not exceed 21. Okay, so now let's create a condition. While the player wants to play, and we're using the logical operators here, and the player's total. So basically, both of the players' total is doesn't exceed 21. If at any time the computer's score exceeds 21, and at any time the player's score exceeds 21, then exit out of the loop, because as soon as anyone exceeds 21, the person has lost, right? So while play again is equal to yes, and let's start with the player, and player one dot get total value is, so and player one dot get total value is less than or equal to 21. While it's less than or equal to 21, it's fine. Go ahead and run what's in the loop. Anything apart from that, don't run what's in the loop. So while play again is equal to y, and player one dot get total is less than or equal to 21. Okay, I'm going to surround this here, and at the same time player is player one, and at the same time computer dot get total value is also less than or equal to 21. If that's the case, then do what's in the loop. If play again is equal to yes, and the player one's total value is less than or equal to 21, and the computer value is less than or equal to 21, then keep running what's in the loop. That means that, hey, they are still in play, they are still playing the game, and no one has exceeded 21 yet, because as soon as someone exceeds 21, they've lost. Okay, so while that's the case, initially we know play again is going to be y, so this loop is going to be entered. All right, so while the player wants to play, the question said the computer should roll first, right? So 1 second. So let's go ahead and roll for the computer. The computer dot roll dice, and let's display a message saying the computer just roll. And let's ask the user, using the system.out.print statement, if, so let's see, let's ask the user if they want to roll to accumulate points, because the question over here said the loop keeps a running total of both the computer's and the user's points. The computer's total should remain hidden until the loop has finished. After the loop has finished, the computer's total is revealed, and the player with the most points. Okay, so not here. Over here. Okay, so at the beginning of each round, the program will ask the user whether or not he or she wants to roll the dice to accumulate points, right? So the computer just roll, and we want to ask the user, do you want to roll to accumulate point? There's a question mark here. And then now we want to go ahead and use a scanner object we created here to ask for inputs, right? So let's go ahead and use a scanner object to ask for input. So I'm going to call the scanner.next next line, okay, dot car at, okay. So so if I call this if I call the scanner.next line, basically it's going to pop up some kind of text box and allow the user to enter something, or basically a sentence or something. If I don't add this char at or car at, right? If I don't add it, now it's going to accept whatever the user typed as a string, right, and return it. Play again is the value that's going to hold this response, and play again is a character. If I leave it as this, it's going to basically allow a sentence to be stored in a character. We're going to have a problem. We want to get the character at position 0, or basically index 0 of that string. So if the user types in, let's say, yes, we want this. We want the first character. This has a position of 0. The E has a position of 1, and S has a position of 2. Okay, Y has an index of 0, E has an index of 1, and S has an index of 2. We want the index or the character at position 0, which is basically the first character. That's all we're interested in. And then we will check to see if that is equal to a small letter y. Right? We'll check to see that. For now, you can write your code to accommodate capital letters and small letters. For now, let's just focus on small letters. Right? Let's assume that the user is going to type in a small letter. You can do that. We've done that in the past with lots of programs, so you can do that. Just because this video is becoming too long, and I think it's becoming a bit rough. So let's finish this, and then you keep this restricted to just a small letter y, and it should be fine.